dust. The old man stood in my way, steadying himself on his walking stick. He'd been to many funerals, but this had been his best friend. They had been together since the early days in civil service. They had both outlasted the war and improvised in the Spike Milligan fashion with the best of them and with the worst of them. But mostly with them that were hanging on somewhere in the middle. That song you did, that used to be Ron's favourite. For the time when he'd done his last stint on the piste, be that in the Alps or any minute protuberance in and around Cardiff. We'd have a glass of his homebrew and he'd break out in the one German song he knew. Ich weiß nicht, was soll es bedeuten, dass ich so traurig bin. He knew all the verses, he could sing all the verses. His face rosy from the cold and rosy from the wine, and his broad and cheeky grin, but I never heard it performed so well. And I noticed you faced his coffin. With that, the old man slowly turned and was absorbed by the gentle throb of the dearly beloved, now no longer gathering. This wasn't the first time. Are you allowed to do that sort of thing? That sort of thing was the thing with the ash. It could be useful. It could be made to make something else useful. Put it on the icy path. That's obvious. On the flower bed for its nitrogen. They'll thank you for it later by growing bigger. When later arrives, there may have been more growing, but would you make a scientific comparative study to attain proof? And as for the thanking, if at all, it'll be all flower speak. Do you speak flower? After years spent in shrubberies, among dahlias and roses, you may, however imperceptibly, be addressed in tulip. In tulip? And after all I've done for them? Better do a Keith Richards, snort the bloody stuff. But remember, he didn't actually. Kept that urn on the proverbial as well as actual mantelpiece, where all ashy remains with a dust particle of self-respect in the self would surely wish to be kept. That or in the wine cupboard. The seriously middle-aged and interfering dear voiced her shrill question where to disturb the piece of swords. The wind, not yet at furioso strength, got hold of hats, blowing them beyond retrieval, followed by severely tousled hair where hats or bands didn't restrain, and the ashes. The undertaker said, "Shush, shush, I don't need to hear that. You shouldn't, and it ought to be my duty to advise you. And besides, you release upon the environment," he thought to himself, "and I lose money. Goodbye, Joyce. Goodbye, Run," they whispered reluctantly, while doing that other thing to do with ash on top of a mountain. Disperse it. Disperse it where the beauty of the landscape beckons you to return for contemplation. Janie found ash dispersal easier. She wasn't doing the dispersing, and she had lived with the remains in the wine cupboard, as near to the homemade contents in green bottles as was safe, without having to fear that Ron would rematerialize in the middle of the night. Drunken and rowdy ashes in the living room, as unlikely as it was, nevertheless, she had known Ron all her life. And while not religiously superstitious, it made for a good story to impress the nephew. But the wind, they shouldn't have opened the wine. They shouldn't have poured it into the heirloom crystal glasses. But most of all, Sally should not have emptied the Tesco bag, partially filled with ashes, into the direction the wind was coming from. Yep, over there. Most of it came back down the hill with them. Much of it hitched a lift in the car. Some of it made it back to the house. It's bath time and hair wash today for all of us. Hasn't your hair suddenly become grey? Only kidding. The ash, of course. My nostrils are full of the stuff, and I couldn't bear to throw the wine away. It didn't taste the worse for it. Keith Richards couldn't have done better. Their superficial banter disguised the fact that both of them missed their parents and had almost daily reminders of their transition from life to memory. Sally especially regretted all the hours she wouldn't spend with her mother, even bickering or complaining about those dreadful and greedy Tories. Joyce had been on speaking terms with Rhodri Morgan long before he was the Welsh First Minister. She never held back with him when she thought one of his policies didn't make sense. He, in turn, regarded her affectionately as his little but annoying splinter in the little finger of his left hand. The sun was breaking through the clouds just as the three swans decided to add a touch of kitsch to the scenery of the lake by flying in studied formation to a part of the water where currently a family with 2 small children waved a bag with breadcrumbs about. Too many people. Someone will notice, and you know what they are like around here. They had done it on top of hills in South Wales over the past 7 years. A surprising amount of ash was still left. Not surprising in a deeper analysis of the mind. Let's wait a bit. There was a gap in the strollers around the lake. Nobody would know from a distance that the bag didn't contain bread. The warden walked past, seemingly out of nowhere, but carrying a bag while walking around the lake gives you legitimacy, much in the same way as being surrounded by small children. Unless the small children are not small children, but young adolescents, then the warden may cast a speculating eye in your direction. Now! Sally held the bag over the water, crouching low. The swans didn't bother, but the ducks, always on the prowl, headed her way. And again, sun rays found a hole in the clouds. Sally and her sister were unexpectedly in a spotlight. She had already started, now there's no going back. And this time it is the end of a ritual. It is the final farewell. They had made up their minds. It would be all of the ash. Sorry, Ron, Sally thought. No more cuddling up to Janie's homebrew in the middle of the night. She turned the bag inside out. All gone, all drifting in expanding circles on the wet surface. Just a few disgusted ducks and the inevitable pigeons, now making their way across the lake to the other bag being emptied, the family with 2 small children. Wait a minute, that's not breadcrumbs. And over there, where the sun is now casting its rays, another bag, no crumbs either. They're all at it. All subdued dignity gone, they walked on, barely managing to hide near hysterical fits of giggles. So there you are. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry.